Okay.
So this will be preserved for
Got it.
future
The ages.
review.
Yeah. The National Archives.
Mhm.
And now that you've started recording, why don't you start with a prayer, Tom?
Yeah, that's a
It seems like we've got some sick puppies in our group that we want to kind of pray for. So Tom, pull a good one out of your, you
I don't
know
know if-
what.
Well, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit.
I think I'd rather be called an old dog than a puppy.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
you
me
dog.
too.
How about
Dog.
Mutt?
Especially if you use sick. Especially if you use the word sick. Yeah.
Lord, we lift up
Anyway,
all
excuse
our,
me for getting.
we lift up one another to you in your love and mercy. The old dogs among us, the sick puppies among us. Help us to continue as we are at the 2-year mark of our weekly gatherings. Help us to continue to seek your will, your love in all things. As we receive, help us to freely give to one another and through each one of us and the community that we form. May what we receive, may we share freely with all those with whom we come into any kind of contact, virtual contact. We make this prayer through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Not bad, Tom. Not bad.
He's
Well,
been
that's great.
practicing, I think.
He's a
We'll
professional
have
prayer.
to see what God thinks about that.
Do we
Not
not have to say,
soon.
hey, bad when it's the other way around?
So,
Where's your shrink?
Megan must have cut us off.
Can you hear me?
here it comes again.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. It could be the connection. I'm not sure. So sorry.
It's my wild
worries.
driving.
And so when will you be home, Frank?
Oh, I'm going to Megan's house for a few hours, and if we get there in time, I'll link up in a more stable computer. But and then she has a couple of things to do because she's traveling on business tomorrow. So then she'll take me home a little later this afternoon. So
Are
What
you
hospital
feeling
do
okay?
you- What
Are you feeling
hospital
okay,
do you
Frank?
go to, Frank?
I go Brigham and Women's in Boston, Fred.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
How are you feeling, Frank?
I'm a little weak, but I feel better since I got out of the hospital. To tell you the truth, I just
And so-
feel better.
Something
So,
about that.
so tell us what happened, Frank. Tell us what happened.
Well, I've had kind of a symptom that's kind of a combination of gastric and chest for a long time, and I've been dealing with it. And then I actually went to South Boston to Parish on Saturday night for dinner. It was a vicariate dinner, actually, and so I came home and to my own house, and about 3:30 in the morning, I woke up with kind of this violent version of this burning in my chest and abdomen. So I got up and I couldn't sleep, and then I got an hour's sleep in around 7, and then I called my sister-in-law who lives in the same town and told her, and she said you should go to the hospital. So, and my brother-in-law drove me. So,
And so why didn't you call 911?
because
Let me see. How are you?
I left that decision to her because she knows my history.
And it would have taken to a different hospital.
Yeah, that's the basic reason. 911 would take me to the nearest hospital, and all my records and doctors are in Boston.
You guys want to know what I got
Okay.
for your birthday? Go ahead. 3 different
Hey, Tom and Fratelli, granddaughter calls. Been great being with you. Frank, I was hoping we might be in touch this weekend,
Yeah.
sort of face to face, but given what you've been through, And
Yeah.
time's growing short for me. It probably won't happen, but know that
Yeah.
you're in my thoughts and prayers along
Thanks,
with
Bob.
George and the rest of us.
Thank
And,
you. Thanks.
and Tom will tell you, Grandpa Duty calls with a daughter just coming in from the orthodontist. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care, Bob.
God bless.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take it out, fees.
Okay, well, here we are.
I'm going to be with Chester Borsky, Frank, sometime in early February. So I'm down in in fact, close to where he got baptized. I'm going to be covering a parish down there, much to my
Oh.
surprise.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah, but he's up and around and doing well. So we're going to have a good time together.
Yeah. Well, say hi to him for
I'll
me.
certainly do it. Yeah.
He's a great guy. You know, he's really extraordinary man. So
So who are you talking about?
Tell us a little about him,
Who's Chester?
Bob.
Chester Borsky is a classmate of ours over at North American College. He was the rector of the seminary in Houston for something like 19 years, which is a very unusual length. Then he became a pastor. He built a beautiful, huge church up, it's kind of a little bit east of the international airport up there. I forget, it's Woodlands or something like that. A lot of corporate people and wealthy people are up in that part of it. And he just, they put up this mammoth thing that I thought it was a kind of an old typical, long thing, but it isn't. He has a huge entry, and then you go in and it's the fan. The way it's laid out. So he really did wonderful work with that. And I would say maybe 2 years ago, he retired and he decided to go back to the seminary to live there. And he's active in different ways, I'm sure, with seminarians. But he also covers a parish doing 2 masses every Sunday, I think, in one of the parishes it's in part of Houston down there. So, and he's our tall guy. I think he was the tallest one amongst us, wasn't he, Frank?
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a very tall guy. And he was a fisherman and a hunter and an outdoorsman, and very wise guy, in the best sense.
Yeah, he kind of has this very calming approach. When you talk to Chester, he makes you feel like everything's all right. Like Juliana of Norwich, everything's fine. Everything's going to be good.
Yeah.
And so last week, I got a recommendation from some of you guys to buy a book by James Martin called The Jesuit Guide.
You got it.
Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything.
Everything.
Right.
And it's like Jesuits for Dummies or something like that, kind of.
I think I need to reread that.
But and so I told you that I've been struggling with a discernment thing, and the question is, how much, if at all, do I want to be involved with hospice this year? And so you guys had said, oh, then, the Jesuits have this, is it an approach? I don't know, a methodology for discernment. And so I jumped to the end to the chapter called What Should I Do? Which is actually, it's great. But as I'm reading this, and you guys have some familiarity with Jesuits, I know Ned and George and Fred does. Is there something unique about being a Jesuit? I mean, they
Absolutely.
well,
They
can
tell
you,
you.
When I was
They
in the
consider it-
seminary, my dad asked me, "You sure you want to do this?" I said, "Well, at the moment I do." He said, "Well, why don't you be a real priest?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "A Jesuit, a Jesuit."
and so help a layman like me.
I think, Tim, you all can expand on this or correct it, but I think the unique thing about Jesuits is that integral in their formation
I think the doorbell rang.
is that they make they do the spiritual exercises, doing the month-long exercise of going through the process that Ignatius outlines in his spiritual exercises that Martin follows. And you can't come away from that. I did an 8-day version of it once, and I did an online 30-day, not 30-day, how much was it? 28 weeks, 28-week program that one of the online sources has of basically making the spiritual exercises and the process of those exercises part of your life. And of course, discernment, discovering how God is working in your life, not as we mentioned before, not the kind of examination where you hold up a mirror and look for what's wrong, but you hold up a mirror and look for God. And that doing that, I personally, I think doing that at probably, I don't know how many, 5, 6, 7 key times in his life has made Pope Francis what he is.
Really?
And probably given him the courage to be steadfast in his discernment, no matter who is throwing shit at him. There are certainly plenty of people throwing shit at him now.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. We have a young woman sitting next to Frank Daly. She may not. Be careful about your language.
Well, if Frank Daly is her father, she's probably heard these words before. Anyway.
No comment.
Yeah.
I think that that more than anything is what makes Jesuits and those who are imbued with their spirituality makes them different from anybody else. Comment.
Couple points that I would offer is they're highly educated. They don't get ordained until they're into their 30s. I'm going to say 33. It seems to me it was somewhere in there. So they go through all their training. They get very high education. They have a lot of freedom to pursue the kind of intellectual thing, because they're going to go to the Jesuit schools and teach a whole variety of different things. And so they're very able men. They like, I think the priesthood on all fronts, as far as I know, are diminishing. So I would say, this is just a projection. I'm not sure it's totally accurate, but it seems to me there used to be 30 to 35,000 Jesuits worldwide. And currently they're down to something like 15,000.
Right.
Maybe thinking it's just the United States, but it seems to me it's something along that line. And because they're reduced in the number of Jesuits available, more and more laymen are serving as the presidents in one way or another of the Jesuit things. And they're very independent guys. They live in community, but they each are kind of pursuing their own thing. At least that's my sense of it.
I would say that the spiritual exercises are really about grace, which is God's unmerited favor, which comes in the form of the Holy Spirit, who prompts us. And you kind of get a contact. What the spiritual exercises have you do is get in contact with your consciousness by recollecting what happens in your life in terms of periods of elation and dismay, and to figure out, well, what's giving you the elation. And Ignatius compares it to water going onto a sponge. and the dismay is water going on a rock. And so you figure out how you're responding to grace through those feelings, one way or another. And so I think that's an important way to think about it.
Well put. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't agree more.
One of the things that happens in that process, I think, is these guys come out of it with adamantine characters. You don't manipulate a Jesuit. You don't scare him. You don't, because the whole formation process is quite a process, and they're very confident in it. When Father Arupe was ill and John Paul came to visit him, and at this stage they weren't happy campers together.
No, yeah, that's right.
And Father, what was his name? The Arupe's caretaker, first assistant.
Can't remember.
An American.
O'Keefe.
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 Yeah, Vinnie O'Keefe.
Yeah. And he said things to the Pope, like the Pope said, well, why don't you guys do this? And he said, oh, Your Holiness, it's just not our way. I mean, in his mind, our way took precedence over, any other approach. Enough to tell the most charismatic Pope in 100 years or a millennium or whatever it is. So there's iron at the core, ultimately, at least when it works.
And the Pope wasn't pleased.
No, he wasn't. He didn't have much.
So let me ask this. So how do you see, what do you see in Francis, for example, that is prototypical Jesuit? Can you help me out on that?
He doesn't.
Well,
Go ahead.
Except his mind.
I think the way he faces different situations, including the great opposition, with a certain serenity, it seems to me. He doesn't get upset. When he's pretty convinced of the way he's doing things are the right things, he doesn't care about what people are going to, the rebarbative reactions to that and so forth. So in general, he strikes me as a very peaceful person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Archbishop Gershwin supposedly has got this poison pen memoir ready to roll about how many prelates, once Benedict retired, humiliated him and so forth. And one of the bad guys from the commentary, you see, is Francis, supposedly. And I read earlier the week that Gershwin had been invited down to the Vatican to talk about this with Francis and talk through it. And I haven't seen any publication yet from Gershwin.
Well, he has got a book out, but I also saw somewhere today that he's been invited to leave the Vatican. And I think that's if you have an archbishop like that who's going to, that's a Vigano act to write that kind of a book and release it almost on the. It's like Archbishop Vigano has been holding a grudge. Archbishop Gonstein has been holding a grudge for a long, long time, and finally now he can release it. The spring has been sprung, and he also is the one who gave that terrible talk called the Munus Patrinum, Now, I'm not sure, I don't know whether Benedict was behind it or not, in which he said, essentially said the papacy has two parts, the active part and the contemplative part, and Benedict's doing the contemplative part, which fed, all this opposition to Francis that he really wasn't the Pope. It was a split papacy. So I don't have any sympathy for Ganswein whatsoever. As for the Jesuits, I admire them extraordinarily because I think their commitment to the society as a community does not in any way cripple them with respect to the individual gifts they're able to give and the say they have in the kind of ministries that they want to pursue.
Okay.
They've done, they're not, they're a society and a community that's not constricted by being one.
Okay.
That's, yeah. And I also, since we're talking about humor, you also all know that when the diocesan priest was asked, oh, Father, hi, how are you? Are you a Jesuit? He said, no, but I'm literate.
That's awesome.
Jeez. And George and Ned, you've had quite a close, intimate relationship with the Jesuit who's since died, correct?
Yes,
What was that experience like?
that was
Well,
wonderful.
it was an e-ticket.
Wonderful.
I think the thing is, Tom, we used to hear a lot about it before you really joined us. And it's just an amazing relationship that Nat, I've always called him Ned.
How's Ned? Let's keep it that way.
Had with him, not I think together, but also on their own whenever that was needed. And it just sounded like he had a tremendous charism for spiritual direction and helping people think through things without any bullshit.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
completely.
it was, I would say, Tim, it was the grace of a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's that? Is maybe baptism counts or something? I don't know. But
I used George, remember, we used to get together. I would call a meeting, and we would meet usually at Loyola Marymount University and in the Jesuit visiting rooms, one of them. And we'd sit down with what do you call those big rolls of paper that butcher paper, and anyway, we'd roll this thing out on the floor, and Herb would take his pen and say, okay, start, Ned. And what this was about was a discernment, so to speak, not the Jesuit discernment, but a discernment where we would, and I was in the middle of Unical, getting closer and closer to executive levels, and with all the competition, with all of the movidas, the things that people up in that area would do to minimize accomplishments of others who they needed to get out of the way. Just a whole lot of politics. And we'd put the CEO at the top and the CFO and the COO and all of that stuff around, and their minions. And we would talk about the interaction among them all. And Herb would begin to ask questions. And, among George and Father Herb and I, I'd walk out of there after 2 or 3 hours, knowing what I was going to do for the next, umpteen months, because he was just so good at politics.
You know what? It was like he had written The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit or something.
Yeah.
He just got all that stuff.
Amazing guy. Remember Father Rausch, who's kind of an eminence at Loyola Marymount, theologian. I don't know, he's got some kind of chair there. We went to lunch with him, I don't know, about a year ago, George, maybe longer.
Yeah.
And he told us that he was having so much trouble finishing his PhD dissertation, and had I don't know, a lunch or a dinner with Herbie. And Herb listened to him for a while and then pulled out a piece of paper and began to write an outline. And half an hour later, the outline, Father Rausch told us, Tom told us, that was the outline for my dissertation that resolved all of the problems that he had in pulling it together. And basically in those few minutes or hours, he gave Tom a guide to it all. Just a mind that was amazing, and a spirituality that was amazing.
No, not every Jesuit is Herbert Ryan, Tim.
Yeah.
No, okay. I've never known one. I don't think I've ever personally known a Jesuit.
Well, there's still time, Tim.
Time grows short. Time grows short.
The thing that you're wondering about is going back to hospice.
Yeah.
It seems to me that you have an inclination that would be a kind of fulfilling thing for you to do.
Yeah.
And it seems like I'm not sure what's holding you back in a certain way.
Can I be honest? I'll be honest. Is I enjoy just loafing around. I just enjoy being a slug, and not saying, oh, I got to go see this person at 10 o'clock or so. And so, and that's, I mean, I haven't said this to Sandra because she thinks that I should do it. But I'm looking and saying, well, like you guys, I'm 80. But then so is it, can you give yourself a pass when you're 80 years old? You know what I mean? Can you say, okay, you've done all of these things, and so just sit back and be a sloth, just be a lazy guy for a while. And so that's the tension that I'm experiencing, is not that I do have an inclination, Fred. I loved doing it. But then I also love, being in my pajamas at 10 o'clock in the morning, reading the paper or just messing around. And so that's my tension right now. To be totally honest. I'd like to be lazy.
There's nothing wrong with that, really.
No, she's in Norway.
Oh,
I'm experiencing that too, Tim.
Are you, Ned, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Last night I got a call. Will you come and be in the choir? Will you put an exemplification together? Would you, 3 things. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, no.
in that car? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
I don't
just
think
tired. I'm tired, and I like to loaf. Yeah.
And so Ned, do we have to kind of forgive ourselves for that impulse and just say, you're not a bad person because you want to loaf? What do you think?
We're human. What do you think? I do. I agree with it. It's there, and we need to discern to what extent we run with it, or walk with it, or sleep with it. I don't know.
But my problem is I've got a guy who's over here on my screen, Big Norm, who is not thinking that way. I mean,
I
Norm
know.
says, okay, I'll
Just need
jump
my
in
bag
and
back.
I'll run a parish. I'll do all of the stuff that I've been doing for 60 years. And I'm thinking to myself, how do I give myself a break? I mean, Norm's not,
In
I'm
spite
not
of
running
being
the parish.
told,
I just helping out. So
Little.
I get free room and board for just helping out once in a while.
Yeah, and you've got Lombardi and you've got Tom, who
Yeah.
are happy
I'm off.
being less active than Norman.
No.
yeah. And then we've got Fred who's still teaching. So, geez, talk about a peer group.
Had to give
You know,
my
I think, Tim, one of the really key things would be go into it kind of making it clear where you need to draw the line. In other words, there are certain demands on a hospice chaplain that maybe I've got to say, okay, I might be able to do that once a month.
Okay.
But not quite off more than you can chew.
But that's a stereotypical subject for Ignatian discernment.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking, George. That's what I was thinking. That's why
it's a great subject,
Yeah.
Shall I enjoy a well-earned rest, or shall I, die in the saddle, or something in between?
You can use that.
Yeah.
And so Ned, how are you going to resolve these requests?
I'm sorry, Tim?
How are you going to resolve the requests from your parish?
I don't know. It's attention. It's
He won't give them a definite answer, and he'll just screw around for a couple of months, and then they'll go crazy and come down on him like a ton of bricks. And so then he'll say, yeah, okay, I'll get on it. And
Some of them.
a few months later, sort of.
No,
Would you say that's not a radical interpretation of your dad in such situations?
The stuff that I'm being asked to do is you're either on or you're not. And I'm afraid of being on because I'm tired. I'm not in the same position as George or Frank at the moment, but I hurt, and what do you do? I have now 10 grandchildren whom I absolutely love, and they give me energy,
and that's a vocation,
and that's just so wonderful. And I want to see them more, and they call. Joshua will call and ask me about what I think. How far the Chargers are going to go, and we're in there for an hour talking about.
They'll know when I come in.
Football, so and I just love it.
Now we've got Frank and Megan.
There's
Hey,
Megan.
yeah.
Hey.
Hi, guys.
And so
Hi.
Megan.
Yes.
So who are you in the pecking order?
Depends on who you ask.
Which flock?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I'm trying to get him off.
Yeah, it looks like we've got two.
Turn the damn thing off. There you go.
There you are.
Perfect.
There you are.
In his pecking order, I'm number 1.
That's the boy, Frank. Everybody thinks you're number 1.
Yep.
They're those kids.
all the
It's nice to meet you guys. He tells me all about your weekly rendezvous and very much looks forward to them.
Well, thank you.
So
Thank you.
We look forward to him too.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thanks.
yeah, he's a good doobie. We'll keep him as long as we can keep him healthy.
And so,
Megan,
Right.
have the Jesuits touched your life in any way?
They sure have. I went to a Jesuit college,
Which one?
the University of San Francisco.
Oh,
Wow,
okay.
great place.
So I was
And you
around a lot of
survived?
Jesuits.
Did
Did
you
you ever
survive?
Did I survive or did they survive?
did you ever have Mark Miller as a teacher?
No, what did he I don't know, I don't recall that name.
Okay. Well, he teaches in theology.
Yeah, no, I
And
didn't have him.
he's just a former student of mine.
Oh,
That's
funny.
a link to USF. And there was Father Cofield, who was one of my mentors, loved a sociologist who was there, whose name I've forgotten. So those are my two links to USF.
Yeah. Yes, it was a great place.
What was your degree?
Great
in?
school.
What was your
What were you
degree?
doing?
Business. I have a business management degree.
Hmm.
And I played soccer there as a soccer player.
Ah, good for
wow.
you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, how was your
Yep.
team? Was it a good team when you were on it?
Yeah. Yeah, we were pretty good. I mean, at the time, which was a long time ago, the league that we were in, which was the WCC, which was primarily the Catholic universities up and down the coast of California, were Santa Clara and who else? Portland. All those teams were the best teams in the country at
Oh,
that
they
time.
were. Oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, Santa Clara won, I think,
Nationally.
3 national championships while I was there, and Portland won another one. So it was great competition. So it was fun.
Were you there when Father Fessio had his institute?
No.
I actually went summers and took courses at USF. I got a master's in religion and theology there too.
Oh,
At the same time she was there?
No,
Oh,
many
okay.
years before.
I was probably not going to exist at that point, but
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it wasn't in the cards at that point.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
we're talking about Herbert and what a saint he was and full of love for everybody. He despised Father Fessio. I don't remember exactly why, but
We can tell you. No,
huh?
yeah.
I'm joking. I said we can tell you.
You can? Okay.
Fred, did you know him? Did you know Joe Fessio?
Oh no, but I
No.
knew some of his people who rooted for him or
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes,
Don't we all?
So
Well,
this
he
is
was
kind
he was
this is-
actually a student of Ratzinger's, wasn't he?
Right, yes.
Yeah.
So who is this Fessio guy? Clue us
another
in.
strike against Ratzinger.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Fred, what did
Yeah.
you say? I'm sorry. Fred, what was that comment?
Oh no, I said,
Some water.
after a person dies, you're trying to appreciate
Ginger
the
ale?
good.
It's not diet, but
Can't
right.
help
That's a
but
mistake.
not overlook
ginger
the
ale sign.
bad.
Yeah.
And Fessio would be
And
bad.
give me something to put it on so I don't ruin your table.
And so who's this Fessio guy? I mean, I've never.
A hard right Jesuit. I don't know how.
Was he
At least
USF
in-
at USF you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
And he was
Canada Dry.
still very much around.
Well, he's Ignatius. Isn't he the one who founded Ignatius Press?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's still a very much going concern. It's a
Do you want more light in here?
But he
Should I say goodbye to these gentlemen?
I don't know. He was certainly hardcore.
It was nice to meet you guys.
See you
Nice to
later.
meet you. Thanks for taking care of Frank.
Thanks for keeping them sharp.
God bless.
That's
Bye.
right.
But anyway, Fred, you probably know him. I mean, he was very controversial within.
I'll be back down in a moment. The kids might be home before that.
Okay.
Well, I had a wonderful colleague named Matthew Lamb.
Oh,
He,
yeah.
he had been a Trappist, and because he went to the Greg and got in contact with Lonergan and so forth, he decided to get into the university system. And so he was super liberal and always coming back with the stories. He was in contact a lot with the council in the way of which team is doing well or not, what's not so well, and so forth. But he'd always be with the radical people. And so he taught, when he finished, I went to BC and he went to Marquette. And he's just a brilliant, wonderful person. And so women asked him to be sort of the male person in their reflection group and so forth and so on. And what happened was that they started really putting the church down in a way that really sounded like the young Matt Lamb to me, but he was so distressed by that. And that's why he left Marquette and came to BC. And then BC was too liberal for him. And so he went to this new university, which was in the vein of Fessio, super orthodox, doctrinaire, and not exactly holier than thou, because you couldn't be if you were in that kind of straitjacket, I think. So he became a really what you were describing, more like Fessio than like the person he did esteem very highly, whom I do too, Father Lonergan. So I remember telling him at one time that Father Lonergan was talking about the Code of Canon Law. What is it, 1917? And he said, it's a disaster. And I told that to Matt, and he just, he was shocked that he said it, and just he felt terrible about the fact that Lonergan said that. But Lonergan was more like the guys you constantly talk about, the wonderful Jesuits that you know. And so he wasn't uptight about everything. But he was worried about the university. He said about the Jesuit community that he came down from Canada to end up with. I said, well, what is the community like at one of our conversations? And he said, they've given up. So in a way, I always think about Frank going to the classes of Rick Gallardi. And he didn't give up. He's still not giving up. And so that was really, he was really crestfallen about that. And he expected them to have an idea about the mission. He was a friend of O'Keefe's, Arupe's buddy. And that was more his speed, I think. At any rate, that's more or less the sad. Although, let me say this about Matt Lamb, which I must say. Any person who ever was in need, grad student or whatever, or fellow colleague, and needed help in any way, he would immediately respond in the most generous and kind and on-time way that you could imagine. So he was really a holy person as well, as the other things that I've said about him.
Is he dead now, Fred?
He died.
He did.
He had a kind of calcification of his lungs, so that in the end he couldn't breathe anymore.
Ouch.
Yeah, awful to. Oh,
What do they call that? Fibrosis of some kind?
Yeah, pulmonary fibrosis, I think.
Fibrosis. Yeah.
probably so.
That's what Mike Clements died of.
And so what kind of week have you guys had? Anything exciting happening in your lives other than being rushed to a hospital like Frank? Frank gets the ticket.
I am going to a hospital on the 24th where they're going to inject me through the groin with a catheter. I don't even know what to call it, but a chemical, certainly. And it's radioactive. And its function is to see if I can assimilate a stronger dose in the near future, because the one I'm getting is kind of just is into the liver, and it enables these doctors, as they put it, to learn my anatomy. One would have thought, but anyway, so they see what this isotope does. If it makes a beeline right for the lungs, then bad, disaster. If it doesn't, and it stays contained in the liver, then I am a candidate for the next phase, which is supposed to be almost a miraculous experience, say the physicians. Because the doctor said, oh yeah, when you get into that, you'll be astounded at how fast your levels drop and all that. In a couple of weeks, you'll start feeling a lot better. And who knew, that there's nuclear medicine, and Ned, there's a Father Franz component in there. What was it? What did they call it with him?
I can't remember, George, but it's so specialized, or at least was. That, Lou had to go to Texas to get these treatments
from New Orleans.
Yeah, well,
not radiation.
Yeah, no, it's not radiation therapy as such. The big thing here is immunotherapy is a big component of this. So I figure this is very interesting,
And so, George, you started out by saying that they wanted to contain this within the liver, and if it goes to your lungs, it's your SOL. I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, they're vague about that. They say if it goes to the lung, oh, that's bad. You don't want that to happen. And that's all the clarity you get. I mean, I could push it, but what for,
Yeah. So this is the 24th.
Yes.
Okay. Is it an outpatient type of thing, or are you going to spend a couple of days there? What's the story?
I think let's see, we report in at 6 or something. Why do they always do that with these damn things? Well, come by at 10. No, be there at 5:45, and I go home that day, but it'll be late.
Okay.
So our prayers nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah, our prayers will be with you.
Absolutely.
Amen. Thank you.
Indeed.
Amen. Thank you.
And Megan still has her Christmas tree up.
She does.
I have one up at home too. See, yeah, this isn't the main one. This is her office.
Oh,
Okay.
what does Megan do, Frank? You said she's got a business trip.
She used to work for full time for a medical device company, and now
Mhm.
she does real estate, and she has a couple of consulting gigs with medical device companies,
Okay.
startups, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So,
Maybe-
this
maybe-
week, one of the things that I found most interesting was, I don't know if you wrote it, Michael Sean Winter's article on Cardinal Pell.
Wow.
And he talked about, one of the things he talked about at the end was about the acids of modernity, as Walter Lippmann once called them, were eating away not only at the faith, but at the disposition to believe. And he says about the 18th century French culture was secular, not so much because people were hostile. Current culture. In French culture, they were hostile to religion. In current culture, it's not so much that they're hostile to religion, as they've lost interest in the faith because they fail to see that it's related to their daily lives.
Yeah, I maintain Barron's wrong in his insistence that the problem here is high school students develop the notion that the Catholic Church is anti-science and anti-learning. And that's why they're running out the doors. I think they're running out the doors because they just don't give a damn. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm reminded
Irrelevant.
of a survey done by the BC magazine for the alumni, and the question was raised about going to church on Sundays, and when they answered, it kind of split between 50-50. But whatever the answer, when they asked why, the people who did go say, I get a lot out of it. And the people who stopped going said, I don't get anything out of it. So in other words, they're brought up to think it's all about me, not about.
On both sides of that equation.
Yeah, both
Yeah,
sides.
And also that it's a consumer product.
Yes.
Yes.
Pro-Jesus narcissism and different narcissism.
Yeah, a common denominator there.
Yeah, I don't
Another
think
thing that I see as one of the layers underlying this is the fact that in the past, faith was needed, God was needed really to explain things that we couldn't otherwise explain, and or to do things for us that we needed. And now that God in the gaps type of attitude is no longer necessary. We are pretty self-sufficient as a society, fulfilling needs and explaining things that used to be beyond us. And so who the hell needs
except we still die at the end of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, but they're doing their darndest to make that not happen.
Well, Tom, it ain't gonna work.
But let's face it, 50 years ago, probably half of us would be dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, more than that.
Well, so the advancements in what we humans can do has been really great over the last 50 or 100 years, and it's reduced the need for God.
Well, that's true, of course.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Norm, I have a sense that you've got your finger on the pulse of what Tom's talking about. And
with high school kids, with high school kids, you mean?
Yeah, I worked in Alemany High School for 19 years. So
And you
I
still
got,
do sometimes, don't you?
yeah, still help out.
Yeah.
But kids just don't see the need for God. You know, it just it's like it just takes away from their time of enjoyment to have to go to church or something. And like you say, they're not getting anything out of it. They find it boring. And so
this
they just
is my daughter who's like 53 or something. You know, and if she didn't have to contend with me, I just wonder if she'd ever find her way to Mass. You know, I just read an article somewhere that said cancer deaths are down a third in the last X years. Now that is potent stuff, you know, down a third.
Yep.
But to me, it seems strange that they don't see that there's something beyond this life, you know. And like a lot of times in my homilies for funerals, I'll talk about how, you know, we start out as inside of someone else. You know, we start out inside and we grow and we develop, and then we come outside of that person. We start a whole new life. And I talk about that. That's what we believe, that we go from this life to a new life. And a lot of people have a hard time understanding it, but I've had so many experiences with people that have had experiences after life experience, or whatever you call it. I don't know. Some kind of experience of is seeing life beyond our life. That to me, it's just powerful. I mean, I'm going to be having lunch with a man today who his wife, he called me when his wife was dying, and I went to see her, and I knew her for a long time. Her name was Nancy Dufault. And when I went in to see her, she said, Father Norm, before you anoint me, I want to tell you something. I died 2 nights ago, and I'm absolutely positive it was not my imagination. It was not a dream. I died and I went to heaven. I saw God on his throne. I saw Jesus, and I saw my parents. I saw my grandparents, and we were laughing and talking and having a good time. And what was really beautiful is that I felt no more pain. I felt she had a lot of pain, so I felt no more pain, and it was so good. And I just, they told me things that I didn't know. That's why I know it was real, because they told me things about my life and their life that I never knew before. And then Jesus came over and said, Nancy, I'm sorry, I need to send you back 2 more days because I love your family and they're going bonkers with the fact that you're dying. So I want you to calm them down. And she says, Father Norm, I did it. I've calmed them down. And it was true, because I walked in the house, they were calm, and they're not a calm family. And she said, now I'm ready to go back. And when I blessed her with oil, she died. Wow. It was really interesting. It's really a powerful experience for me, because she was talking sincerely that, you know, it wasn't a dream, that it wasn't something she imagined. It was really something that she experienced. And I've had things like that before, but not as powerful as that one.
Norm,
you should write that up, Norm. You should write that. How many priests have had that rich kind of experience, such as you have? So I think it'd be a wonderful piece, however short it is, to get published and get in the LA paper.
Great advice, Bob. Thank you. I agree, 100%, Norm. Even if you have to dictate it to one of your teen authors.
Well,
it's just interesting having.
If you do it, be sure to send it to all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, please. Norm, in that line, I have a question for you, because you had a very definite near-death experience.
Ooh, yes.
And was there any inkling of that sort of experience of the beyond within that whole process of your coming?
Unfortunately not. You know, I knew why I thought I was dying, because the people coming over and saying, is he dead? Is he dead? And I said, no, I'm not dead.
That would be a clue. That would be a good tip off. Yeah.
And then
That is
then
evidentiary.
they took me over to the hospital. It happened to be a Catholic hospital, thank God. And there was a priest there, and the doctor, the intake doctor, said, I can't do anything to save his life. I really can't. And the doctors and the priest said, no, you got to try, because he's a priest. You got to try to save his life. Then he said, well, but it's going to be very, very difficult. And the priest says, I don't care. I want you to try. And he says, well, I can't save his leg because my leg was cut off. He said, no, I want you to try to save his leg. He'll need his leg. And so the priest anointed me, and son of a gun, here I am. I'm walking around, running around, enjoying life. And I don't even limp.
Frank or Tom, have you had anything that is similar to what Norm's parishioner went through?
Yeah, no. And
You know, I generally, I mean, one of the guys in my
Read a lot
pursuit-
about that, but
yeah,
I've read a fair amount about near death experiences. There's a doctor, in fact, he's from the Carolinas in your area.
yeah,
Ian something, who was a pediatric neurosurgeon at Boston Children's Hospital, and got bacterial meningitis, which the guitarist in Britain, Beck, just died of. Came up in 2 days and killed him. Only less than 90% of people who get that get bacterial, not viral. Bacterial meningitis, I understand, die from it. And so he wrote to Ethan something, I forget what his name was. He had a near-death experience, and he was a rigorous scientist, and he wrote a book explaining it. And and then there's a doctor in New York, I think, who treated a lot of patients that had it, and they talk about some of the things that I forget who else was commenting on this, but about calm and what the woman told you, calm and peace, and all of that in the experience. And so I find them more credible than some little kid saying, oh, geez, I saw it, this, that, or the other thing. So I think there are very credible people out there who would explain their experiences probably in terms a little different from what Norm has just told us and what Norm went through in a way. But it, it kind of verifies kind of what he's saying. It converges with what he's saying.
Norm, let me ask you this, Norm, as a priest, when you hear it, first of all, did you believe this woman?
Oh, very much, because I've known her for years, and she is not somebody who would make up a story.
Okay, when you hear it, you guys who have a lot of theology under your belts, is there anything that Norm says or that you know about these out-of-body, it's not out-of-body experience, is it? Is there anything that conflicts with your theology of dying or theology of death, if there's such a thing?
There is.
What's that, Fred?
Well, just that there is a theology of death.
Oh, okay.
And
Norm, did it upset you in any way? Did it conflict with what you thought happens to people when they die?
Not really. Not really. And I remember reading that book, Heaven is for Real, by that little kid who supposedly died and went to heaven, and his experience. And what really blew my mind about that is that they come back, they tell stuff that they didn't know before. Like, for example, he came back and he said, Mom, I have a sister in heaven. And Mom said, no, you don't have a sister in heaven. I said, yes, I do. She told me that she was in you and that you lost her and she died and she went to heaven. And he said, oh my God, I had a spontaneous abortion, one of these things that just lose the fetus. And he said, she says she has no name because you never gave her a name. And It was interesting, that whole idea, and you see that in different stories about people that people have experienced, and to me it's kind of like, wow, that it seems like there must be something, because there's too many people who have had experiences of afterlife, and some of them negative. Like I went to the hospital one time, and I anointed a man, and the nurse told me next door was a 34-year-old young man who was dying, and he was in a coma, so he couldn't answer, he couldn't respond. And so I went in, and as I walked in, I said, Father Norm, I want to go to confession. I don't want to go to where I saw. It was horrible. It was awful. I don't want to go there. Please hear my confession. And so I heard his confession, and then he passed.
In this dream.
Wow.
I had a cousin.
By the way, the doctor, excuse me, George,
Sure.
the doctor who wrote that book that I was referring to, the pediatric neurosurgeon, also came back and said that he'd met a sister that he never knew he had.
Another miscarriage, or
He didn't know. Apparently, she was an adult who died, fully grown adult. Apparently, from another marriage, or her mother gave her up for adoption, or something like that.
I had a cousin who had a massive heart attack on a golf course, and the whole drill, thought he saw God, being rushed through corridors of light, people tugging at him from behind, trying to keep him here. He's saying, no, you don't know what you're doing. You haven't seen the alternative, etc. And then wakes up in the middle of an operating room with, I don't know, 10 surgeons or something. And as he wakes up, they're all cheering and giving each other high fives. And so that's where the rest of us were when he came back. And I guess he was a very bright guy. He figured it out, what had happened, but I don't know. I'd like to sit down with Daniel Chavira about that. I have no impediment to believing this truly happens. But does it? I mean, what, Norman, your case sounds pretty good. Sounds real.
It was real for me.
That's
Well,
kind of real for me, and I wasn't even there.
On the general question of why people are disinterested in the faith or whatever, I think it has to do, I mean, this is a sore topic for me, because I go into the classes to teach, and I remember so often when I would be going around in BC during the summer, when the parents were bringing their kids to look at the church at BC, how often some of the guys that were the ones who took them around and showed them everything, they said they got so tired of having parents ask them the question, well, will my kid get a good job if he comes to BC? And so I sometimes talk at the beginning of semesters about why you're here, why are you taking, you had to take the class because it's you need the credits and so forth. But basically they all say they really are doing it in a transactional way. It's not how much you learn or how much your life has changed, but it's being prepared to be much more successful than they otherwise would have been.
Fred, I'd like to jump in because of what David Brooks wrote about higher education. The more important goal of higher education is moral formation. And
Sure.
that moral formation leads toward future success because there's a foundation. If that makes sense for you, it sure does for me.
Oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But we talked about discernment at the beginning of this conversation. And people aren't really deliberating in a serious way. They don't really discern because in any situation they're in, the first thing that occurs to them is, what's in it for me? And that's a constant thing that if they're asking that question, they're just calculating what would be to their advantage rather than what's the right thing to do. So deliberation means you deliberate in the light of the good. You could use the neutral phrase, that for the sake of which. That's what Aristotle did, Henika. But whatever that for the sake of which you decide and do everything, that's your God.
Right.
And
You
that was
have
the sad
God.
thing for me at Alameda, because students went there not because it was a religious place where they could, learn more about God. They went there because if they went to Alameda, they came out with a better education and could get a better job. And the fact that it was a Catholic school meant nothing to them.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, Brooks
I don't
talks
think
about
there's
the
anything
rip.
wrong with wanting to get a better job, but you don't have there's no higher context.
Mhm.
I had a student many years ago who
Hey, Boris, can you come
did his
here?
dissertation on Gregory the Great. And
Okay.
many of the writings,
Bye.
he was one of the three popes I can stand.
Who is this?
Gregory the Great.
Yeah. And
You and Herbert might have had.
what he wrote really was made it clear that what's tremendously important for a person's life, it's what's going on above the neck. In other words, we talk about the heart, but the heart is really connected with what's going on above the neck. And that means, for prayer and discernment, but it also means that you're becoming well-rounded. You're thinking about the possibility not of just getting by or doing well, but being noble. Noble is a beautiful word because in Greek it means that you not only are morally good, but you're beautiful. That's what nobility means. And there would be a way, it seems to me, that when I first encountered Catholic school teaching, there was a way in which that's what the nuns were trying to inculcate in us. I mean, they were shoveling shit against the tide, but still they did their best, and they gave us a sense of something to look up to. And so in other words, we know, for example, that the Platonic dialogues were written because Greece was in chaos and decaying. And Eric Voegelin, a wonderful philosopher, said, yeah, the problem was that the beautiful people were no longer good. And he gave the example of reading the Iliad and the Odyssey as softcore porn. So there's a lot of stuff going into that thing about, but I think a tremendous thing that I've learned is what we experience right in this group, the indispensability of friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And friendship there's different kinds of friendship based on usefulness to each other or pleasure or something. But the highest kind is friendship of the good, Aristotle put it, which means that that you're that for the sake of which is pretty lofty by comparison to others. And I think there's a certain sense in which the church doesn't do a tremendous job of communicating through their education system what that really might mean. Because in general, even the people teaching in the colleges are socialized and acculturated into a lower viewpoint. And it's not their fault. But the thing is, if you, if you think of the guys you became friendship, and this includes this group, it's because what truly is the case is you look up to that person. And when you look up to those people, you tend to love them. And if they are really people you could look up to, they'll tend to love you. It may help you become better. It seems to me that's the dynamism of our monthly meeting or weekly meetings. For me, it's going to be monthly pretty soon.
Thank you, Fred. And I'd like to address this especially to Tom Welbers and Norm Supanchek. And that is Sunday Mass, daily Mass, is one part of our practice of faith. But isn't that sense of community that you, Tom, and you, Norm, try to create among the faithful that makes it more than just once a week or more than just an hour or so? But how that sense of community relates to everything in the rest of our life. Is that a valid?
I agree with that. I think that the point that I try to do, I don't know if I accomplish it or not, but I try to do is that you're not there to worship an unknown God, but you're there to build a relationship. That we're there to build a relationship with a God who truly loves us and wants us to be with him forever. That's what I try to build. And that's not always easy because there's people resist that. Some people just come to church because they got to go, and they've learned they had to go and that's it. But some do come and really see that as a goal to build a strong relationship with this person. Just like when you go to marry somebody, you really want to get to know them. You don't want to just marry some guy you met on the block. He looks kind of cool, so marry him. But you marry somebody that you want to build something beautiful with them. You want to have somebody that you can talk to and can listen to you, and to build something and build beautiful in the relationship.
I had
Fred,
excuse me.
I'd kind of like to add just a deeper dimension to that, or another dimension to that. I think I mentioned a few weeks ago one of the books that I don't remember that much of the content, but the title was so striking, by Gabe Huck, early in the 1970s. Liturgy needs community, needs liturgy. What that embodied was the whole summit and source idea, which I think Pope Benedict refined, maybe John Paul II did, refined to liturgy, Eucharist, as the summit and source of Christian life and mission. What I got out of that is community, our relationships with one another, are going to be the byproduct of how we worship in the liturgy. And how we worship in the liturgy is going to be the byproduct of how we build community.
Mhm.
So that,
I
for
like that.
for
That's,
example, in the in the Eucharist, we don't go there um, to get something. We go there we celebrate the Eucharist, we come to Mass in order to enter into and embody a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. But that cannot be divorced from developing and embodying a relationship with one another in community. It's not just community, it's one another in community. In other words, community can be just a mass. Okay, got a whole bunch of people here, you got a community. No, a community happens only when people are in relationship with one another, building something greater than the sum of those who make up that community. But we do that by together seeking and entering into a relationship with God. But our relationship with God is never a me and God sort of thing. We enter that relationship with God only when we are entering into the community relationship with one another.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
You just cannot have the one without the other. And so much of our propaganda, if you will, that passes for evangelization and catechesis concentrates on one of that or the other.
So had an experience this week, Wednesday, the funeral of a young girl, 44 years old, who died while she was going through RCIA. I mean, she went brain dead. And so she had not yet made it to Holy Saturday where she was going to be confirmed. And so the priest, our parish priest, came and confirmed her and all that stuff. So the funeral was Wednesday. And I'm going to what you're talking about, Tom, the community among us, or our community. And so during the Mass, I would say, oh, maybe there are 150 people there. Probably only 20 of us were from the parish, because she was a paraplegic, so she was not active in the parish, or didn't, as in the RCI. But so we went because we were close friends with her sponsors. And so mostly everybody there was not Catholic. And so afterwards, we were getting together with another couple and we were saying, what do you think a non-Catholic's reaction is to a Mass, to the liturgy? And so it was like, well, a lot of weird costumes, vestments, don't understand. Sometimes, Tom, I don't know that the Mass is a way for building community. Am I asking something of the liturgy of the Mass that it's not meant to provide?
I think one of my responses to that would be, you're asking something of the presider, who should be aware that he is, by the very fact that he is articulating the prayer of the entire community as the body of Christ, should be aware of that in a way that actually does communicate. Now, granted, communication's a two-way street. You have to be receptive to it and responsive to it in order to receive it. But I just find so many priests either are going yada, 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 or they are engaging in their own private prayer and accepting the fact that people are onlookers.
Yeah.
And having a sense of gathering people, and there's two ways of looking at it: gathering people around the table of the Lord to enter into the sacrifice of Jesus, because Jesus is truly present there, therefore he is present in the sacrifice, and this is a focal point of our participation in it. I don't know that that's really uppermost in a lot of priests' minds when they are saying the words of the Eucharistic prayer, which is really the prayer of everybody that they are articulating.
Yeah, let me ask Norman. Norman, hypothetically, let's say you've got a group of kids And among them are several with a real interest in the church and the message of Jesus and saving their soul, whatever it is. And they're really into it. I mean, they're open to it at least. And you pray with them, and you have serious discussions. How activated are they by the Mass?
Well, it depends on who's giving the Mass. Some of them come back and they are very active, very, very much in love with God and really want to build a relationship. But they come back and they say, man, that Mass was awful. There was no message. I mean, the priest spoke, but there's no message, real message that touched them in their lives, And others come back and say, wow, that was a wonderful experience. I really experienced the presence of God. And that might happen a lot too on our retreats, on Kairos retreat or our junior retreat, discipleship retreat. It would happen to them. And some of them would start, being more active. And then some would, they were active for a while, and they wore off, and they said, well, it must have been a dream or something. I don't know. And
I'd like to put this, Tom Welbers, to you. How important I hope it is that the scriptures of that particular Mass get connected with both the liturgy that's going on and the community. And that if a priest doesn't have that high on the priority, they're going to miss out and have, Norm, what you call a terrible Mass.
Yeah.
Nightmare.
I mean, take the scriptures, put them together, put the homily together, and use them as a link to the rest of the liturgy and community.
The problem that I see, and this is evident in the way that you described it, take the scriptures, put them together in a way that is relevant to the rest of the community, and give that in your homily. No. The only real preparation for a homily is to spend time the week before, whatever, the lifetime before really, listening to what those scriptures say to you. And I am a member of this whole community. I am one with those for whom I will be presiding, with whom I will be celebrating on Sunday. But how do I listen to that scripture? And then my homily, whatever extent I actually prepare the text and the words, but then my homily comes from me having integrated the scriptures and giving my integration of the scriptures as a member of this community, sharing it with the rest of the community, attempting. And, this is just a mental picture that needs to go through. I don't know what this gesture means, actually, but a mental picture that should go through your mind as you're doing this. What's happening is I'm sharing this with them in a way that hopefully I am seeking to draw them in together as community into the same way of thinking about the scripture's relationship to their lives and how they respond to it in the light of, in a sense, how I respond to it. Now, the response I get to that was, Father, why don't you talk more about abortion? And I kind of say, well, I just did for what I hoped was 7 minutes, but turned out to be 22 minutes. But I just did talk about it. It was the gift of life, and respecting the gift of life was integral to how I processed this scriptural message to share with you. Does that make any sense? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It does to me.
Great response. Great.
Me too. Me too.
We have 3 priests in our parish. One, when he, even daily, puts a homily together and presents it to us, we feel, and it's seen after Mass when people kind of crowd around him and feel like they've done a shared thing together. They've worshipped, they've taken the Eucharist, and it's all of us. And he's a Chinese priest who can't speak English all that well, although he's very good. He's articulate in his own way. In fact, sometimes it draws you in, and as he's trying to put together what he's wanting to share about the scriptures that, as you say, have sunk into him, and he's trying to bring others together. We have another priest who comes out, reads everything, goes very quickly, and leaves. And he's a very lonely guy. He bought himself a dog. It seems to me, because he needs to have some kind of a relationship with some living thing. I just can't.
Ed would have been a parrot. They had better conversations with you.
This talk reminds me of an experience I had some years ago. I had this student body president in my class, and after class, she was a theology class, and after class, she came up to me and said, well, I'm kind of distressed because my father is losing his faith. And not long before that, I read something that Gerard Manley Hopkins said. And I said, well, it's funny you say that now, because he said, when he has somebody who really is losing their faith, he tells them, give alms. And so I told that to her, and maybe a month or two later, she came up to me and said, I told my father what you said, and he went down to work for the Catholic Worker, and now he's not having any trouble with his faith. So,
wow.
So it was a lovely thing.
That is very cool.
No, Fred, what I wanted to comment on was, you brought up St. Gregory the Great, and my primary care physician is Jewish, but his name is Gregory Schwartz, and he and I have this thing goes back and forth about his brother's name is Peter, who's a doctor also, and he says that when his parents' Jewish friends come, they say, how are the popes? I told him at the next Thanksgiving, he should tell Peter that he respects the fact that he was the first, but remind him that Gregory was the Great. And on Wednesday of this week, they asked me if I would entertain a meeting with some students from Harvard Medical School and their mentor. It's like an interview process. And I believe it or not, I spoke to them about Gregory the Great. I said that there is actually kind of an intersection or a parallelism between the life of a doctor and the life of a priest. And Gregory the Great was famous for saying that his priestly ministry was like being a physician of the soul, and that the patient will be very much impressed if you are so well prepared in your area as you will be at Harvard, but there'll be something missing if they don't see in you someone who cares. And it isn't so much that it's a feel-good piece. It's actually part of the healing that you bring. So I mean, it ties into this whole thing we were talking about.
Yes, very
the other
much.
dimension of life, you know, the question of community rather than just straight ritual. The fact that people can see through what you're sharing with them, and how much you're a part of them, very clearly, and which is critical, I think. I don't completely agree with Tom in terms of what he said about the way he prepares a homily, etc. But, you know, so what? People look through it and see me as this individual and him as that individual, and make a decision as to whether or not there's some kind of authentic love of them there. And if there is, then I think that's what moves us and makes us a real community. I always think we should, as much as possible, end with something that people can take out the door with them after a homily. Because the community has to be something that's not inward looking, it has to be outward looking as well. So I think we've touched on a lot of this. You know, early on, someone talked about how the young people don't see a need for God. Well, I think that's true, but they may not see but I think there's a lot of people who know that stuff they've been told about success when they go to BC, that in the silence of their own hearts, they know that that's not really enough. There's something else. Mm-hmm. And to some extent, I think we haven't found the way to speak to that. The church hasn't.
Yeah.
And that's
Dave,
part of it.
I think that's a great point. And before we finish, I'd like to go back to Ned and George. And I'm so curious about how your mentor linked the liturgy. I mean, he had clearly great mentoring skills with butcher paper and all that went with it, but I haven't heard what you got from his take on the connection of liturgy and that building of community as a mentor and a pastor. I want to leave it at that and just ask you to reflect on it if you can.
John, let me say one thing real fast. One thing Herbert would do with me at least once a year is he'd say, come down to Loyola and we'll say Mass. And I said, huh? And so I would show up and we'd go into one of these little Mass rooms, and I'm the guy saying Mass. In other words, all Herbert said was the words of consecration. And I schlepped through the canon, you know, and oh my God, what a remarkable experience when you're saying
what a
the
gift.
words.
Oh my God.
Oh, what a gift. What a gift. And, you know, they're the same words and all that, but holy cow, what an adventure that was. You know, and if you lose your place or something, there was Herbert, you know, playing.
Te tocati, senor. You're on, Ned.
Do I have to be on? I don't know how to describe Herbie, and you're asking about how he integrated the liturgy with our lives. He did it simply by celebrating Mass in a way that he knew what he was doing. He wanted to do it. We were doing it together. I never had the experience that George did. I never got called once a year to celebrate the Mass myself with all the liturgy stuff. But
George, who got the stipend?
Yeah, right.
Well, we discussed that.
But he was when he celebrated Mass, you knew you were in communication with and inviting and being invited to join in the sacrifice. I felt just so comfortable when Herb would celebrate Mass. Just complete comfortable. I was there, he was there, Jesus was there. I don't know what else to say.
If I can, in a few minutes, just to kind of compliment that, tomorrow I'm flying out to Oakland. And I'm going to be there to cover a parish for the Unbound program, and to kind of get a sense of the church. I kind of went to their website and watched two of the masses that they do. They do the Saturday Mass and they record it, and it was there. And the pastor did exactly, I think, the kind of thing that many of you were referencing to, because the one that I'll comment on, you know, in the start, they have music and everybody comes in, and then before he starts the Mass, out part of the Eucharistic thing, they have the singing, and then he talks to them, and he kind of talks about where things are and what's going on, and then before he actually begins the Eucharistic prayers, he says, "Now everybody turn and you know, greet one another." And so they had this very lively exchange. And so what I'm expecting to walk into tomorrow afternoon is going to be a community that really is connected with one another. And he's very much a part of it. He's I mean, I can't do it myself, but he just speaks so off the cuff, you know. But I think what you talked about, Tom, he had really integrated what he was sharing with them. And it was just, I think that sense of relationship, if the people are not building relationships, they don't have a sense of God being there who's alive. God is at the altar. God is in the priest who's up there, you know, instead of we're all part of the body of Christ. So I look forward to my experience tomorrow, and I think it speaks something to what we were all talking about today.
What is the Unbound? What is the Unbound that you were talking about, Bob?
Unbound is a program that was started back in the early 1980s by a Christian brother and a Jesuit priest who had been missionaries, respectively, in Guatemala and Peru. And they were down there for several years, and this was in the late 70s, early 80s, when the war was going on down there. And they saw the need of the people there. And when they came back, you know, their powers above wanted them to, well, now go to one of our schools. And they said, no, we want to go back to help those people. So it started in 81. And what we do is we go to parishes and explain children need nourishment. They need education. The family needs a decent home. They need to have some basic, you know, medical care, so to speak, so they can grow up. In Guatemala, the girls especially, they don't get an education beyond their 9th grade, or being 9 years old. And so that's the program, and we take no collection, but we invite somebody, pick a kid or pick an elderly person and relate to them and support them to the extent that you can. So that's basically what Unbound does. They have about 285,000 people around the world right now that are being cared for by about 235 people from parishes like this one I'm going to be at. So
what's the parish, Bob? What's the parish?
It's St. Antioch, St. Ignatius of Antioch.
What?
Huh? Yeah, the guy's name is Robert. It's in Oakland. I asked him when I talked to him this morning, and I don't have that paper right in front of me, but I said, do I need to bring a canoe for tomorrow? Because it got deluged. So anyway, and he just is so spontaneous and but he very much what you talk about, Tom. I think he integrates it and then just shares it, draws them in.
You know, Norman Supanchek is not without some gifts as a celebrator of masses.
Oh my God. You're
I
so right.
saw him say a funeral once, and Catholic family, most of it anyway. But there had been, deviations on a personal level where A wasn't speaking to B or that type of thing. And I guess, right, pushing the Pater Noster, or I don't remember when, Norman says, okay, now we can't go ahead with, words to this effect. We can't go ahead with this if people aren't speaking to people.
Really? He said
So-
that in mass?
Were those your words, Norman, or pretty
Something like
close?
that. Yeah, I can't remember, but something like that. Yes.
And that's, we can't go any further. And so everybody's got to forgive everybody right now, right here. And people were hugging and crying, and it worked. And are there any comments you want to make about that mess, Norm?
Well, no, I try to do that at most of my masses, especially like funerals, because sometimes at funerals you get people that have been very alienated one from another, and you try to see if you can do something to break down the barriers that are there in the family.
But that was really something, because everybody had a moment of paralysis, and then they, were hugging and saying stuff I wasn't close enough to hear, but it was pretty real as I saw it.
Norm has done so many things. He's baptized several of my grandkids. And
Yes, I have a picture of me holding one of them up by a cross up there, and
I have several pictures of you taking the little baby right after the pouring of the water and lifting them up way up in front of the crucifix.
I bet the mothers were petrified.
Oh,
they were.
I don't know about that. Everybody seemed to be in thrall with what was going on.
And it was like, what was that movie? It was a cartoon and then a different style. King of the Jungle, or
the King, Lion King.
Yeah, Lion King.
But Norm would suck everybody in. Everybody would be part of what was going on. It was just so wonderful. Funeral.
That is the essence of presiding.
Well,
Keep
it's
everybody
just,
in.
Good call. Good call.
Norm does that. At least whenever.
I try.
Yeah. Well, Norm, you and I spent 2 weeks or more together in Turkey, and we celebrated the masses sort of alternated. And I have to say that was my impression. I was a little bit envious of the way that you were able to draw the people in your way of presiding. It was magnificent. I learned.
As a friend, Norm, as a friend for many years, I want to put a focus on what your family life prepared you for that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say, is that my family life prepared me for that, because my dad and my mom, it was really important that we all be present to each other and that we care about each other. And my dad would get very upset if one of us hurt the other one. Woo! He'd be really upset. And we learned that was an important part of really being family. And I see parish as family. It's a family. And if people are hurting, I think it's really important that we reach out to each other. And of course, my parish, as some of you know, is a parish for people who are homosexual, and so they experience a lot of hate and hurt in their life. And the fact that, I'm there with them, for them, and care about them means a lot to them.
Mm-hmm.
So
Tom, that St.
here
Ignatius
we
of
are at
Antioch.
12:04. I think the ball is in your court, Norm, for our closing prayer.
Oh, dear God. Well, dear God, we thank you for this interchange that we have and the friendships and the bonds that we have with one another. Help us to continue to build those, because when we build bonds with others, it strengthens our own relationship, not only with each other, but with you. And so help us to continue to build those bonds. Help us to continue to be open to your love and to share your love with others. We ask this through Jesus Christ, our Lord.
Amen.
Amen.
Frank Daly, get yourself well.
Yeah.
Yes, Frank.
Welbers, God bless you.
Thank you. But Bob Bono had something to say, I think, about the parish.
St. Ignatius of Antioch in Antioch, California, which is a suburb of Oakland.
Okay.
So it's real nearby.
Sent to everybody in the chat. I send it to everybody the church website. The link.
Thank you.
And I presume that this weekend we can check out your presiding.
Mine?
Yeah.
Do they tape it?
They take the Saturday Mass. I'm presuming the pastor will say that Mass, and then I'll get a sense of the community. I preach, I do the homily, but we'll see tomorrow. He's going to be there, the pastor. Sometimes the pastor is gone on vacation or something, but this guy's there.
Uh-huh. Well, then look forward to it.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Guys,
I do.
have a healthy and holy week, guys.
And
Bye-bye.
you all, God bless you all. And
Love you.
here comes the end meeting for all.